in this book, when body says no, actually Dr. Gabor Mate, provides an example of little exercise and what you can do by yourself until you actually see a therapist and professional. And by all means, when I'm about to suggest, I'm just showing things that you can do yourself while waiting to get the session. My job is actually to detect when the stress can definitely severely influence the disease for somebody, and then make sure to provide them guidance to direct to the proper therapist. I have no intention of going there, but at least I should be able to suggest. And so, for example, he says, in order to benefit from this, pick up a paper and try to answer these 6 questions, okay? And do it on your own in a quiet place, and ideally you want to feel back into the safe zone when you are not stressed out, okay? And so, for example, in my life's important areas, what am I saying no to? Okay, so what that does, it identifies in a non-judgmental way, in a curious way, things that I know I'm compelled to do, but I also know they kind of hurt me. And you're having your conversation with you. Okay? So, for example, this patient, she said she cannot say no when her children ask her to take care of their children, her grandkids, despite hurting her. I mean, she knows if she doesn't sleep at night, her heart rate is going to get worse, her appetite for wrong food is going to be higher, and then her diabetes will get worse again. I love my children, but I don't want to help them. So that's what she'll write. The second thing is, her daughter demands and bullies her into taking, actually orders her into taking care of her granddaughter, because the daughter has to work. The second question you try to answer is, can you be candid about what is it from saying no actually does hurt you? Now, you may do it anyway, but at least be aware of it. All right? So how does my inability to say no impact my life? For example, clear. She can't sleep, sleep deprivation, heart failure symptoms, increased emotional eating. The third part is be able to, you see, we're trying to separate in our mind sensation, which is a bodily physical feeling and detection, from emotion, which is happy, sad, worry, hurting, perception, which is the interpretation of the emotion, which often happens from past beliefs. Why? If we can separate those, then we buy time to identify the certain automatic behaviors that we have that were brought from the past. Don't have to always happen, but we have to be able to separate them. So what bodily signals am I overlooking? What symptoms I have? Chest pain, shortness of breath, anxiety. What I differ as opposed to the difference between her doctor, me, and the patient is that she made no connection between her chest pain, shortness of breath, anxiety, and the fact that she's stressed out. And the fact that she's stressed out because she's compelled to take care of the grandkids, even that's hurting her. So answering these questions allows her to understand where that's coming from. I know it's obvious from us, from outside. You talk, oh, it's so obvious. No, it's not obvious at all if you are in it. Not at all. Trust me, I've done it. Okay? So that's important to have that conversation. So we try to separate the sensation, the emotion, from the perception. So now, I found the sensation is I'm hurting. All right? I got chest pain, tingling, numbness. My heart is beating fast. Emotions. I'm anxious. I'm exhausted. And then what is the perception behind it? What is the hidden story behind why am I not able to say no? Okay, why she keep taking care of her grandbaby? I mean, who doesn't want to be with a grandbaby for an hour or two? But not if you are extremely exhausted and it makes you sick for days and weeks. That's a different story. Everybody else who is otherwise healthy will say, wait a minute, I need a break. Okay? So, why? Because she has guilt and shame. I'm not helping them as mother and caregiver. She promised and she has a belief based on her prior experience with her mom who was not there for her. I will always be there for my children because my mom was never there for me. That's her belief. It doesn't matter if it kills her. She's going to go for it. That's why we do what we do. Where did I learn this story? The difference is, it sounds like, I mean, who can argue with that argument? Why wouldn't you be there for your kids? Except these are her grandkids, and the kids have a mom. And if grandma dies, how is she going to help anyway? So it's a little different. It's not exactly the same. But we don't realize the difference. Okay? So where did I learn these stories? She learned this story because what happens is she's actually reliving how she was with her mom. That immediately go into that, what I call implicit memory. Goes back, immediately as fast track. That's how she practiced her whole life growing up. In childhood, when mom demanded, abused me to take care of my siblings and did not support me for when I was hurt. By the way, I know it sounds like I keep putting her mom on the bad spot. Well, mom is possible had to work every day, and this is how she had it with her parents, and she's just passing on what she knows. I am not placing here the blame on the guilt on mom. I don't know the circumstance. There are different versions what this could be. That's not the point. The point is how she feels about it and how she perceived it and what's her belief about what happened. Okay? And then where have I ignored or denied the yes? In other words, I want to identify the no that I could try to say no to, once I'm able to overcome why that happens, but also want to say yes to things that makes me, connect me back to be alive and puts me in the safe zone that I've been ignoring. Why? Because I got to take care of the babies, I'm too tired, I'm too stressed, I'm not doing anything that makes me feel happy. So, for example, she has an amazing voice. She actually loves to sing in church. And I can tell she sent me a recording, it's amazing. All right? She was so happy that after a year she was able to do that. It's been years since she was able to do that. She loves to do community, church activities, be with friends. It's very important. And she's saying no to those. So I'll tell her, identify what you need to learn little by little to say no to, and identify what you need to say yes little by little to, because that gets us back to the safe zone from the danger zone. All right? And it helps. And that's exactly what this is on trying. Basically she's been triggered by her physical and emotional abuse pain. Now the difference is not mom anymore, it's her daughter. Is she going to say no to the daughter? No, because in her mind is the mom right now. That's what comes. And I have the duty for the baby. I mean, what grandma wouldn't want to do everything for that baby? Of course. And I'm not saying she shouldn't. But not if it kills you, then you're not going to be able to help anyway. So there is a problem there. Okay? And then the price she pays for going back into that danger zone, addictions are back up. Now she's gaining weight again, 20 pounds. Now she can't stop eating, and thanks God she caught it in time. At least she was able to ask me for help. What's happening? The difference, she didn't make the connection. There was the stress. All right? And then, why? Because it's natural that I should be a caregiver for my grandbaby when my daughter needs help. That makes sense. Okay? But not to the point that you're abused and you die from it. There's a difference. The way to do that is to go back. If you can have the strength to say, hey, let me recover a little bit. I can't really help you with the baby right now. I love the baby. But I need some rest, some break from this. I need to learn to say no. Help me to say no. And then work on the other stuff. To things that you want to say yes. So we can get back to the safe zone. And that's what makes the difference. She's 20 pounds more now. Her hemoglobin is back 6. And she was shocked that she's going towards diabetes again. That's all it took. Only 3 months to reproduce back what happened for 25 years. Okay? So she's scared. But we're working on that. Don't worry about it. Okay? So, I'm going for the second patient. This is the artist and the caregiver. All right? 61 years old, black man who is referred for congestive heart failure, He's got an ejection fraction 10% that's really near close to the heart transplant level. And the problem is that he has so many scars in his heart, it's causing an electrical storm in the heart, for which he gets the defibrillator kicks in and keeps shocking him. And basically over 20 times last time, despite that actually the electrophysiologist tried to do already an ablation to try to stop that circuit, and it didn't work. He appears depressed, is joined by his wife, wonderful relationship, very supportive, you know. When I asked, he works as a painter and photographer, obviously does lots more to express his artistic side. He's an artist, teaches art in college. He appears to be perfectionist and highly intelligent. I asked him to actually, after I saw him first time, look, there's a lot of stress going on. I see you're depressed. You really need to see a specialist and therapist and start talking about what's really bothering you, okay? And we talk a little bit about that. And he was able to, little by little, improve his mood and was able to tolerate some of the heart failure medicine. It looked like we had a few weeks of quiet. And then again, he gets readmitted for another storm, lots of ICD shocks. And then I was able to complete, now that he was in the hospital, do the whole workup, what's causing this underlying weak heart disease that he has, heart failure. And turns out it's a condition called cardiac sarcoidosis. We found that in the hospital, which is an autoimmune conditions where your own immune system attacks the heart, okay? But not only the heart, attacks also the lung. You can have your lung involvement, thyroid, every endocrine organ. It's interesting. Everything that activates stress hormone system from the pituitary, this condition can, work against it. Okay, and so we diagnosed him with cardiac sarcoid. We started him with high dose, steroids. So then I started to, and if you were to look at the pattern, remember those I was telling you about that insula part of the brain where we integrate the emotions with our physical perception of the world, with our pain perception of the world, but also with our memories and current, present, and then the output from that. This job is to see how emotions influence the immune system and the endocrine system, hormonal system. And when those are suppressed, then you get deregulation. Often patients who have heart failure, they can also develop autoimmune conditions, and that's what happens for him. He got the scar from sarcoid, which triggers his ventricular tachycardia. And keeps activating the adrenaline. And the way it works, somebody who has these scars in the heart, not everybody gets shocked all the time. Otherwise, we'll have no time to do anything. Just because you have a scar doesn't mean you're going to get that, electrical storm. There's always a trigger for the electrical storm. And the trigger could be, problems with, you have diarrhea, your potassium, magnesium may drop in. In other words, there could be some physical illness issues too. But it wasn't anything clear why it was happening. So then I talk about what other stress do you have in your life? Because that triggers adrenaline. Adrenaline is by far the biggest trigger for the electrical storm. And what I was saying is when you look at this condition, 7 out of 8 patients with sarcoid are actually black ethnicity. Okay? 3-4 higher lifetime risk. If they get it, is higher, more severe disease at a younger age. 1 out of 8 are white. But if you would look at what they have in common, there's always the same personality trait, which I'm going to talk about. Okay? So I started to talk about him. Okay, tell me about you. What's happening? And we had this interview. And basically, he grew up, his mom was single mom. He was the youngest brother of the 8 children. As you'll think, right? He should be the spoiled one. This makes no sense. Except it so happens he's the most sensitive one. Okay? So when Mark worked 2 jobs, now they had some help from somebody else. And guess what mom worked? As a teacher and a home health aide. So what does that tell you? She has the same when she grew up. She develops the caregiver syndrome. She was fine for that. Talking about generational trauma. Volunteered to help mom taking care of he volunteered. He wanted to. Why? She felt as being the most emotion sensitive the stress the mom was going through. This is not like the other version where mom was demanding to do that. It's not even that. It's humane, right? Nobody will see anything wrong with that. Okay? Before developing congestive heart failure, the source of his chronic stress turns out 10 years prior to seeing me, he had to, and he still has to take care of his mom, who's now in her 90s, but it's obvious needs a lot of help and support. And that's stressing him out. It's very close to his mind. Feels guilty that he's failing at taking care of his mom. There's a lot of going on. Feels remorse and anger that currently the siblings refuse to help. Doesn't mean they never help, but not enough. And he feels, look, I've done so much for you guys when we grew up. I'm still doing it. I need some help there. At the same time, I don't even know if he's upset more that they're not helping or because they don't have the same attitude. Hey, I shouldn't have to tell you that you should take care of your mom just like I'm telling you. That's just, it's possible that bothers him more. All right? So, feels shame and unworthy because his family never supported him and recognized him as artist. So, where he gets his gifts is this sensitivity. He's actually an artist, and yet he was never recognized in the family, except one of the brothers that unfortunately he passed at a young age that he had the best relationship with, and who, when he was 12 years old, commissioned him to do a portrait, and nobody else reacted to that. So that's his background, how he grew up. And now I ask him, well, again, he has the VT storm, what's happening? Well, it turns out he's remodeling the house. There is some major issue with the construction company doing it the wrong way and not taking any responsibility for it, and it's just a lot of stress, and he feels guilty that, number one, he can't fix that with making that. Number two, his wife has to do that, and he's the caregiver, right? I mean, I'm here to protect my wife, I'm here to protect everybody, I should be able to handle this. It's not working, all right? So this is the setup of what's happening. The watchtower that comes from some prior beliefs from childhood kicks in and is fast way before what's the current present. What's the present situation? The body is telling, I'm about to die. And you worry about the kitchen remodeling and those guys, what they're doing there? And yet, to him, the priority, how it feels, is the duty for the others. I mean, it's obvious for us. Doesn't mean it's obvious for him. Nor he can help it. It's compulsive. But that's where it's coming from. All right? So, new trauma. On top of that, obvious after you get shocked 20 times, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a horrible feeling. As soon as you feel something is wrong, it's going to get activated again. You get shocked again and punished. How do you think it is going to contribute to his feeling of shame and not feeling good? All right? And anxiety. You feel like you lose control, and he feels like, wait a minute, I had to just put my mom in a place where I'm no longer active, me taking care of her. So he feels guilty about that. All right? That's not helping. So if I were to have a similar, and again, these are things that one does with the therapist. Okay? And I don't do that. My job is to identify and really try to convince somebody that you really need to take this seriously, because if there is a way, this is the only way. It doesn't mean all therapists will do the same thing, but most of the, you can always change them. But one of the things you can do, I can tell you, access to a good therapist is not only is very expensive, but it's very hard to find too. All right, so while we're doing this, these are things that one can do. Pick up a piece of paper in a safe zone, safe place, feel good, in a way that you can be curious about. It's like, okay, I had this. Try to answer in my life important area. What am I saying no to? Why? Because he has to have this dialogue with himself. Us, it's obvious from outside. If you are obvious to him, this would have never happened. So I'm saying no to? Caregiving of the parents to the siblings. Letting my wife take care of the house. Wait a minute, my job is to take care of my wife. I can't let that happen. How does my inability to say no impact my life? What are the feelings? feels angry and remorse with siblings who refuse to help. He's exhausted, he's got anxiety, he worries about mom, about his wife, not being able to cope with what's happening with the kitchen remodeling. Sad, hopeless, depressed. He's worried he will get more shocks. That's a lot going on. And what kind of body signals am I overlooking? And he feels all this. He told me, he's got sometimes diarrhea, heartburn, not eating. That's obvious. But what's missing is the connection between those bodily feelings, the sensation, and the stress. And then the stress, this trigger from his own decisions, which are not actually informed in the current reality, but they're based on some prior beliefs from the past. They're just brought, and it's compulsive. We can't say no to it. And that's the part. So what is the hidden story behind my belief? What is the belief that behind my action? That I think I'm right to say no to myself. I'm remorseful that my parents and siblings never accepted my art or endorsed it. Therefore, I'm going to keep doing what I'm supposed to do to help with that. One of the things that somebody who becomes a child parent at early age, whether it's because was forced to help mom, whether it was because lost a parent, losing the parent could be a physical thing or it could be a functional thing, that just disappear or is just never there. Okay? All these children will develop all this that I'm telling you about. You get anxiety because you feel like somebody is your own parent is about to abandon you. It's your fault. I have insecure fears about that, and I need to fix that. So I need to do the opposite. So how am I going to fix that? Well, I need to fortify my own self-trust. How am I going to do that? Well, if I have fear that I'm not good enough, and it's my fault, then I'm going to be a perfectionist and controlling. And I'm going to do as best as I can everything that's around me. This way people feel like I'm worth being loved. If I have fears of disappointing the others so they can love me, I can fix that by being a people pleaser. Nothing wrong to be nice to people. What's wrong is to be nice to them when it hurts you all the time. Okay? So it's different. One is a choice, the other one is a compulsion, which then you ignore. Why? Because I need to get back my trust. What other things we feel? We can actually become alcoholics. Because based on that, I will do to please the people, do what I need to do. I don't want to be lazy. So I have to work and get the job done. By all, doesn't mean the price I pay. Or you could be like me, an overachiever. All right? Why? I fear failure. All right? Now, why do I fear failure? Because when I grew up, somebody kept telling me I'm no good at something. It's very simple. Now, that somebody could be my parents or whatever family member, but it's a consistent insult for a kid who has no regulatory mechanism, looks at the adults to tell them how to interpret what's happening. Or it could be the environment. I can tell you where it came from me. I mean, not in my family. My mom and dad never said anything like this to me. As a matter of fact, my dad always said, I only have to check his grades once a year. I just sign on it. That's it. He's on his own. That was not the issue. I always had that support. The issue was outside. In communist Romania, there were two kinds of kids. The kids from parents who were part of the Communist Party and the kids who were not. That was it. The kids who were not, never appreciated, always just smashing your face. There was never, oh, you did great. That didn't exist. As a matter of fact, when I decided to go in medical school in 11th grade, all my teachers told me, don't do that. You have a math brain, you gotta go into mathematics, all right? And I believe them. But my dad says, don't listen to them. Just start studying. See, I think one day you're going to like this. So I didn't take them seriously. I didn't take him that seriously. I barely studied because I thought I'm failing anyway. Those guys already told me it's not going to work. And then when I failed first time, this national exam, you had to be in the top 1 out of 1,000. Sorry for those patients who thought I always did great. No, I didn't. I failed myself too, including in the academics. All right? But bottom line is, I failed first time when I tried. But I failed literally by a question. I mean, without even trying, I almost made it. So that's how was my message. Like, wait a minute. Why am I listening to those guys? I should listen to my dad. I'm going to study and I'll take this. And of course, next time, people did this for years. I studied for a couple of months and I passed easily. So then I learned my lesson. I'm not going to trust my teachers who say no to me. I'm going to trust my parents and myself. And guess what? I got the tool. I got the brains. And I need to take education in my own hands. And there is no stopping after that for me. I can tell you after that, each time in medical school, I had similar situation. I don't like what I was learning in Romania. At one point, on my third year, particularly after revolution, I was disappointed what I was learning. I felt like we were learning things from 20 years ago. By the time they translate something in Romania, the textbook was from 20 years ago. And I said, wait a minute, why am I wasting my life now? So I refused. I took advantage of our revolution. There was nobody will have the presence, so you can just miss. So whole year, I just locked myself into a library where I studied from American medical textbooks, the whole year. All right? When my dad came and he said, look, I don't want you. I was like ready to repeat the year. I said, no, I'm going to get what I want. Then I can go back to these idiots and do what they want me to do. Okay? And my dad convinced him not to repeat the year and do that, because probably would have stopped everything that I've done after that. And he was right. But bottom line is, I learned again to distrust my professors and not leave my academic educations in their hands. And then I came here. Why? The moment I heard that I can just learn something and pass the board exam, well, I said, each time I just said, well, I don't know if I'm going to fail. I don't care. I didn't even know I could come here. I just sat for this, and then I learned I got a good grade, and somebody said, well, actually you can apply for a job there and get postgraduate education. So, oh, that's great. I applied, and I got a job here. And when I came here, fear of failure. The first day I had to present to my attending. All right? Well, you don't present in Romania. Only the professor talks, like I'm doing right now with you guys. I mean, would you dare to say a word right now when I'm talking? No, that's the culture. So I come here and I was shy, and my attending, who actually is a phenomenal, very well-known person, didn't mean anything bad. I was doing so poorly, not only that I was trying to read the material and about the patient, but obviously my English was not good. It's still not good, but somehow I get around. And he took that away from me, told me that next time you memorize, and he's going to hold that, each patient. And then he told me that I need to practice in front of the mirror before I talk to him. He thought that's a good advice. Well, how do you think he made me feel? How do you think it made me feel when I had to give public lectures after that? Do you know what's the greatest, biggest fears that I have yet to conquer in terms of stress for me? Is to have to talk public. I know I look like I know it or no. I still have yet to conquer that. It's a lot of stress. Okay? But that's where it starts from. So how do I conquer that? The next year, all I did, I sat at the hospital. Everything was English for me. I learned it. I knew I have the proper education. I just didn't have the culture and the English. I learned English. I became an overachiever. Hey, I even hit the workaholism part. I actually enjoy working hard and being successful. Okay? And trust me, eventually there was a price I paid for that. But bottom line is, I'm no different than anybody else who had completely different story than I had by choosing those things. Why? Because saying no is a sign of weakness when you have just a conversation with yourself. I must be strong. Saying no means I can't handle anything. That's what happened when you don't have a parent to guide you with that decision. So where did I learn these stories? At age 12, my brother commissioned a painting, which I did, and I was very proud of. Unfortunately, although I was providing and helping everybody in the family, no one appreciated my painting. I felt like I was invisible and not worthy. So if you feel invisible and not worthy, almost the same like when you're abandoned, you're going to do anything to develop those skills. All I'm saying, being a perfectionist is just a symptom if it's not done right. Being a people pleaser, being a workaholic, overachiever, comes, one of the source roots is this: you've been invisible. Nobody sees you. So how you feel? You feel lonely, unless you're able to do something to attract that attention. Also, you may get into the wrong relation with somebody, because all you need is one person that fakes well, that's paying attention to you for a month, and you can make some wrong decisions for your life. So it sets up our future relationships. And of course, sibling refused, he learned that story because sibling refused to help with mom when he grew up, and feels angry about the lack of support. Also shame and guilt that could not convince them to help mom. And it could be lots more. This is just the beginning of the conversation, and I can tell you it's extremely difficult. Why? Because when you are in that spot, one of the things they feel hard is to even talk about it, because they don't like to ask for help. It's a sign of weakness. So they don't talk about it. And this kind of conversation, unless somebody volunteers, I can't do anything about it. So only so far I can do. All right? And if I were him, trying to develop things that will put him back into the safe zone, would be to do things that he enjoys with the others. I don't know whether he's right, but one of them, he should go back in painting, express himself in art, enjoy being, or whatever makes him happy. But learn to say yes and make time for that. I always say, I could be a workaholic for, 16 hours in a day, and let's assume I'm going to sleep 6 hours a day. But I need to be a selfish human being 2 hours a day and take care of my needs. Communicate with my own, whatever makes me go back. We need 2 hours to go back to the safe zone and be selfish. And if we don't do that, it's not going to be good. And we are prisoners to those beliefs. So when you do this kind of conversation to yourself, the reason to look at the past is not to dwell on it, but to let it go. What we do, we reset that implicit memory that was moved into our permanent memory as a belief. We reinterpret. We move it from, why? When we were a kid, we didn't have any role into how we interpret it. It's just there. The problem is the interpretation from today is what gets us into trouble. So when you start to talk about it in a way, as long as you're in the safe zone. You see, if you're not in the safe zone, you just use it. You just do it. But if you're in the safe zone, you can then start working with it and try to give a different context and establish a new connection where you don't always have to listen to it. You can say, hey, good old, like this is Gabor Mate, how he does is amazing. He's like, hey, little old stupid friend, I know you helped me in the past. I don't need you anymore. You can stay there if you can have that conversation. And that's the difference. So the moment you know where your suffering came to be, you're already on the path to release from it. This is the only way. Now, it may hurt that you have to face that. I mean, who loves to talk about horrible traumas in the childhood, even for a minute? But unless you're able, but you'll be surprised that if you keep working with it, you can get better at it. At one point, you move it out of implicit memory to explicit context. Explicit means I understand the context, and I understand what happened for that belief that stayed there in the past has nothing to do with the present right now. Something else is going on right now. Now I'm thinking in the present. And I'm not going to use that. Okay? That's the intention. And, I get my teaching, I'm not a Buddhist, but I get my teaching everywhere I get it. And this is what Gabor Mate actually quotes. All right, how are we doing? We still following? All right. Patient number 3, the abused and the caregiver, this one. 55 years old, white woman, developed congestive heart failure. Basically, this is a white woman who has the same condition as the other version. Because I want to show you how similar her personality is that with the other patient. and it's got nothing to do with any other background. So she develops heart failure at age 20. I'm sorry, at age 48, 50. EF is 20%. She's been already diagnosed by Mayo Clinic with cardiac sarcoid, and eventually she ended up in our clinic in May last year. And I saw her, I adjusted her, the 4 magic letters, GD, I think, goal direct medical therapy. Remember, big 4 medicines, they attack the stress hormones. And then her heart function 3 months later improved to 40%. So we're making progress. So I said, oh, that's good. And then 6 months later, she develops again worse symptoms of heart failure. She was seeing a local cardiologist. She's telling me, they already, suddenly her blood pressure goes down. She's not tolerating the medicines anymore. She had to stop most of them. And her local cardiologist says, well, you got to go and see Baxter Rescue because you're going to need a heart transplant. And I was like, what's going on? Okay. So went back and I said, let me see, maybe her cardiac sarcoid is activated again, which is again inflammation in the heart triggered by the immune system attacking their own heart. So indeed, when I repeated the test, it showed me that her cardiac sarcoid was super active in her heart, and the heart function also went down. We started her back on high-dose steroids. Well, what's prednisone? It's cortisol. It's a stress hormone. I just give it in higher dose. All right? And so if I give you a stress hormone out of the pocket in mega amounts, would you think that has something to do with the stress, what's happening to you? All right? So started back on that, gradually improving, able to tolerate back her heart failure medicines. Now she feels back to normal. I do not have an updated echocardiogram, but I know it's going to look better because each time her symptoms preceded what happened to her heart function. But the question is, I'm going to show you a different story. I created here a timeline. I'm sorry how it moved from Mac to PC, talking about different programming here. But this is this is her heart failure started around 48, 50. Initially, when I met her, it was 20%, despite whatever medicine she's on. After I changed her medicine, it did imagine look like we're moving in the right direction. Really, the heart, at least most of my patients will improve within 3 months. You see a difference, okay? And I start to worry when I don't see that improvement, particularly in younger person. And then in March, it's starting to get worse. So I go back and I talk to her about her prior life. So she grew up with a single mom after age 5 to 6. Her parents divorced at age 5, 6. At age 12, her mom remarries, but also she gets a stroke. So she has to take care for a while of her mom. Then eventually, at age 23, she gets married. She has 2 children, good marriage for about 8 years. Then suddenly the husband decides he doesn't want to be involved with kids, and he just leaves her. So she decides, I don't want my children to suffer and not ever having a relationship with dad. Therefore, I'm not going to tell them anything about why he did what he did and what's happening. So she bottles up everything, and eventually, when she, about 3 years later, I think 3 or 4 years later, she has a second marriage. Now, this marriage, the catch was, unfortunately, the husband loves alcohol, so he became an alcoholic. Then he also he has atrial fibrillation and gets sick. So now she becomes a caregiver for him too, all right? And that's the setup, up to about age 48. Incidentally, and then eventually, recently she has a third marriage. She seems to be doing well with a good husband that's supportive. But here's where cardiac sarcoidosis appeared to her at age 48. At age 48, it was a few years after she actually divorced her second husband. For 10 years was a caregiver for the husband and caregiver for her kids. As a single mom going back to work. By the way, very successful with her job, but doing all this. Now, she did have help from mom, but again, it's a lot of duties there. So, turns out that her cardiac sarcoidosis was not the first autoimmune condition she had. She started to have autoimmune thyroiditis since age 23, okay? Actually in the middle of her 20s when she learned about her first husband saying that he doesn't want to be dad anymore. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is the timeline with every condition she ever had is chronic, whether it's immune system or whether it's heart failure. And the severity of the condition correlated with she had the maximum stress of being a caregiver or being left alone. Okay, and then I went back and I said, hey, what's happening now? What's stressing you out? Because everybody thought it's just a heart getting worse. What do you want? Right? She needs a heart transplant. That's what we think as cardiologists. That's what the patient thinks. Let's prepare for that. And I said, tell me more. What's stressing you now? And she told me she's been managing her son's business, being a manager for 20 people. I don't know exactly the field, but it doesn't matter. It's a big, stressful job. And why? Because while she's sick, okay? Because why? Because her son needed her when he grew up. She didn't need anybody to take care of him. And her son may go down too. Now, I'm going to help my son once again. Okay? And that's what was happening. So I discussed with her. I said, look, you got to learn to delegate. You need to be out of this stuff. Okay? And then, of course, I gave her more steroids. Then I told her she needs to see a therapist. Her trauma that triggered this time was, again, the first time when the first husband left, she needs to focus on her kids and give everything. Her son, again, needs her. Now, she forgot the son is no longer 5 years old. But that doesn't matter. That's what moms do until they die. Is it true? So anyway, that put her back into ignoring her own body, suppressing all her emotions, not listening to what's happening. And we got back to the exhaustion phase when the heart fails, the ejection fraction keeps getting worse, and you start to be limited in anything you do. You're going towards this. Immobilization, fear, exhaustion, depression, diabetes, autoimmune conditions. Your immune system starts to attack you, and you start fainting. All right? So personality traits for chronic illnesses, whether it's cancer, autoimmune, or heart failure, is something like this. You have a compulsive concern for the emotional needs of others while ignoring our own. Again, there's nothing wrong to care for others. It is wrong if that kills you. Because you're supposed to be authentic and protect yourself at one point. As a grown-up, now as a child, you will do what you have to do. Why? We don't have any regulatory mechanism. We're going to do what we need, what our grown-ups tell us around us that we depend on, and we'll do it. But once you're a grown-up, something is missing there. All right? Rigid identification with a social role, duty, and responsibility. All right? Repression, and what's the disadvantage of that? It's all about the others. That means you tell your brain that insula, suppress me, suppress the immune system, activate the stress response to protect me while you're suppressing the immune system. Get more adrenaline going. I got to do what I got to do for the others. Harboring and compulsively acting out on two beliefs. I am responsible for how other people feel, and I must never disappoint anybody. That's another symptom. Obsession with that. Okay? That doesn't come from a normal grown-up. Okay? That comes from something else that happened before. So the root cause actually is of childhood is perception of the kid that is abandoned with a reverse parent-child relationship. That kid may never be abandoned. But if for some reason to help mom with her anxiety, volunteer to help to become a parent or co-parent, then that's what's happening and created that. So these traits originate in subconscious coping mechanisms from childhood, developed during reverse parent relationship, but by becoming parents for ourselves, siblings or our parents. Consequently, we need, seek, and become caregivers. As a matter of fact, when children leave the nest, they don't know what to do anymore because they can't prove themselves they're useful for anybody anymore. All right? So that's what Gabor Mate calls a traumatic tension, attachment versus authenticity. I mean, for her whole life, she was all about the others, caregivers. The moment there is no need to care for somebody, you realize that authenticity, myself, is not demanding anything from myself. You haven't developed who you want, what you want, what's happening. And that's what happened. Everything was about that. Now I'm going to give you also another example. This is a 38 years old black woman who developed congestive heart failure after a heart attack. Now, a young woman at age 30, it's extremely unusual that you get a heart attack. Now, men get it easier, but women are supposed to be protected by their estrogens, okay? So she got 2 stents, and I met her in the hospital when she was admitted with a heart attack, intensive care unit. Well, of course, I dig into what else is there. She had what we call associated comorbid illnesses, already some diabetes, some high blood pressure, and kidney disease. Particularly her blood pressure was pretty hard to control. And then I talked to her, and I said, look, I'll put you on this medicine. I think things will get better, but we got to work what's happening with you because something else is going on. All right? So 3 years later, I saw her for about 6 months. Then she disappeared. And 3 years later, she comes back and says, hey, I want to reconnect. But sorry, I stopped the medicines a year ago because I don't have any more refills. And so then I look at her. She lost 30 pounds. She looks like a pretty independent and happy person. I repeated our echocardiogram. Heart was back to normal. I repeated all the blood tests, cholesterol, everything was normal. No trace of diabetes. Okay, and no medicines. So I said, what'd you do? All right, tell me what happened. So then I think, you must have had some major stress when I met you first time in your life. That maybe somehow you're able to handle it. So she said, well, yeah, a year prior to attack, there were major fights with her husband, and she had to take care of her son. And eventually, she decided she was going to divorce him. And then saw a counselor. Then she got a new job, a new life. Everything started. She was able to see. She was able to say no to what was bothering her. It was a process. It took a while. But eventually, I can tell you right now, she's great. All right? And I put her back on some basic medicines. But my point is, the only intervention that has happened, yes, we put the stents up the heart attack, but the heart function being weak still, all the diabetes, all the high blood pressure, everything else was there. She literally fixed it by getting actually therapy and solving the stressful problem because she was not on my meds no more. Okay? All right? And that's important. I'm not recommending we shouldn't take the medicine. In fact, she agreed. She came back because she felt like, for the future, I still need the medicine. So we put her back on some basic medicines that need to be there to protect her. But she's done fabulous. And I told her. So the idea is that counseling allows you to talk about this. So why was the point of talking about? Well, if you name it, you tame it. The problem is to name it. It could be very stressful too. That's why it needs to be done with professionals, and it needs to be done in a safe zone, because that's their job. And it needs to be done volunteer. I really want to. The truth is, everybody wants to get better. That's just in us, that we want to go back to healing and safe zone. But it has to be open and it has to come from the person. All I can do is to guide and tell you, okay, I think you'll benefit from that. All right, patient number 5, 62 years old, black woman. I met her at age 52 initially. She's another patient that I met her literally when she was referred for heart transplant because, was denied by 2 other places. The situation, she was complicated. You can't offer heart transplant when your heart is still, when your body is still under treatment for breast cancer. That has to be cured in order to avoid that. Now, back then we weren't too big with these left ventricular assist devices. Now we are, but we didn't have them available. So her ejection fraction 5 to 10 years in prior 6 months after she received chemotherapy for breast cancer, which is the chemotherapy that actually did that. Okay, at least that's the. So she stopped eating, feeling overwhelmed, feeling that this is the end. Refer for heart transplant at Emory. But again, everybody knew, because she already been turned down by other local transplant institutions in South Carolina, which are actually excellent. Actually, they knew they can't offer. They knew we couldn't offer the other. So then I'm on the side of Emory that doesn't do the transplant, that works with what's happening when we don't qualify for that. So she said, I admitted her in the hospital, and I removed 30 pounds of fluid. I started her with some basic medicines, but she could barely tolerate anything. And we started talking about the lifestyle plan, all right? And gradually, after 2 years, her heart recovered back to normal. Okay?
2 years?
It took 2 years, so it should be taking only 3 months. Good point. And then, after all this, she remarries. She works as a hairstylist. She has a good few years. Everything is great. I've been seeing her, once a year, doing well with the heart. Ejection fraction is still normal. But now she develops high blood pressure. It's harder and harder to control. More and more medicines. Worried about that. Then she gets a new breast lump. Then I don't know exactly what was the decision because she didn't get the cure here, but eventually she needed both bilateral mastectomy and both breasts removed. Then this year, the major issue, blood pressure is harder and harder to control, but also having side effects from the medicines for blood pressure, some of them. Except that, so what happens, she'll go and she would misinterpret which medicine is calling which. At one point, we'll stop all of them. So she admits being under, so then I asked her, look, your blood pressure is up. I think there's something else going on. So she admits being under a lot of stress lately, worries about everything. And by the way, have you ever tried to help somebody who worries about everything? It's next to impossible. It's very difficult. That's my mom, by the way. Okay? So it's difficult. So then I had to try to figure what's going on. So we had a 30 minutes interview. And she told me that basically she, until age 9, dad was not home because he was in military. And mom raised her, including the 3 boys, one of them with disability, Down syndrome, 7 children total. She had to help her mom. Eventually, at age 9, dad is home, but he's always on the streets with alcohol abuse, brings home another woman who asks in front of everyone for dad to state that she loves her. And that's pretty sad for her daughter. Apparently, she was the only daughter, and she was, daddy's girl. So think about how she felt when she saw that. And dad said, yeah, in front of the whole family, that she loves the other woman. So eventually dad gets sick. A few years later, dad gets sick. But mom said, well, I want you to stay, understand. I want him to stay, and I want you to help me and understand that I want him to stay. Because apparently he always, he went on the street, but he came back, and he always provided the money, whatever was there, for everybody else to be there. So mom says, no, I know he does what he does with the personal stuff, but he's always been there for us, at least financial. So she accepts that. Then at one point, when she remembers an event when, under the influence of alcohol, dad kind of physically threatened mom, and she tried to come in the middle of it, and she acted like she'd pull a knife and would do something. She didn't do anything, but she felt extremely ashamed and afraid that that she even thought about that. And eventually, a few years later, she goes on to a beauty college. She becomes a hairstylist. That was how it was back then. Then she needs to get a job, and dad starts working on actually building a place for her. So it's not like this dad was never there. It was trying between the moments to help, okay? And then in the middle of this, dad is found has got advanced cancer in the bone, then in the brain. And then when she goes to visit him, she faints. And she faints, and she told me when she fainted, she remembers very vividly, there were 2 overwhelming emotions. One is, dad is dying. The other one was how horrible she felt that she ever thought anything negative about her dad. Okay? And she couldn't take that. So her dorsal vagal turned off, and she fainted. Okay? And then eventually passed. Meanwhile, she kept caring for her middle brother who has Down syndrome, and eventually passed at age 49. She married briefly, 4 months at age 24, after she finished her hairstylist. She told me, and it only lasted for 4 months. She married within a month of knowing him, and says, so what happened? How come? He said, well, it looked like he was the only one who paid attention to me. All right? Completed the beauty college, works as a hairstylist, very successful. took care of her mom until she passed in 2020. Turns out, because both mom and her sisters, which is aunts, helped them, to basically she grew up with all three of them. Then she took care of them too until 2018. Feels guilty they had to be placed in nursing home eventually when she was sick. Present stress, she worries a lot about her friends who always fight, but also stresses with her two brothers who refuse to help with mom care. One of them, who actually does help, unfortunately developed a brain tumor, and now she's worried that he's in abusive relation with a manipulative woman. Eventually gets separated again from the second marriage. I asked her what happened, and she says, well, I feel he's a workaholic, comes home late, he's never there. And that's not what I feel like emotionally I need. But also doesn't want to listen to me. I feel like I want to share what happened to me or whatever it is, and he's a quiet dude, doesn't want to think about it. And I felt like he was not satisfying my emotional needs. So when I happen to know some of her family's members just because they're my patients too, and she's perceived as the nicest in the family, and this is about 50 people family, okay? And by friends, and she's a people pleaser. She's perfectionist, she's compulsive about everything should be clean and tidy at home. So now I'm going to put again in the timeline of the events so far, all right? This is unknown to me when she had her breast cancer and then chemo, and I met her as heart failure. Remember, if I start somebody on medicines, usually within 3 months they feel better and the ejection fraction improves. This took 2 years actually to get better. It was in the same time, look, think about it. I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm getting chemo that puts me in bed for 6 months. Doctors tell me, there's nothing we can do for you in this state. You need to see somebody else. And she's the caregiver for 2 disabled aunts who never leave the home, while she's working as a hairstylist. Okay? That's her. So then turns out I was taking care of her mom too, which she refused to put in nursing home. Eventually, after she recovers, she needed help. And, although more distant, continued to be a caregiver for a disabled brother. And then after heart function improves, this is when high blood pressure starts. Look what happens. She's been now the main supporter for her brother who develops brain tumor. Now, why is that significant? Here's what's significant. And you think this is coincidental, but it's hard to make this up. The brother has an aggressive, abusive girlfriend just like her dad. Her dad had a white girlfriend. The brother has a white girlfriend who is abusive, and everybody recognizes she just wants to take his money. So what do you think she's thinking all along? What happens to my brothers, my dad, is going to happen to my brother. And I feel horrible that it's about to happen again. Okay? So I went there, and of course on top of that, she's going through separation. There was nothing major like yells or anything. She just didn't match in that moment with their emotional needs. And they're working though actually on it. So I talked to her, and tell her, look, you're living in the past. Look, you already had this attitude of a total caregiver until you die, even when you're so sick. And the reason why she was able to get out of that is because, for 6 months, every doctor told her there's nothing they can offer. And the moment I met her, I put her in the hospital, I told her, I don't think this is the end. I'm pretty sure I can help you, but you need to work with this. So all I did, I was the one who told her there is a solution. And for some reason, she felt safe with me. Now, it's also possible that obviously she was looking to find one person that will say that all along. The truth is everybody wants that, no matter how misdirected they are by their own beliefs. Okay, that's just normal. So that's what she was going through. Okay, and we do need to know, at least when it comes to, so this a patient developed based on similar caregiver issues. There are also lots of treatments from her childhood. Black women actually younger than 50 have twice higher risk of dying, more advanced disease when it comes to breast cancer, more inflammatory, and the hardest resistant version, which is triple negative cancer, okay, less responsive. And we also need, they are more stressed because whether we like it or not, white people are not exposed to racism, okay? And for her particular situation, it so happened there was a white woman that was destroying her dad, her family, but also that was happening with her brother, okay? So that's important. Again, the personality traits is what we talk about it. I'm not going to repeat this, but it starts from a certain reverse parent-child relationship. Her problem is that her trauma, although was in the past, there was too much similarity with the present, and then you can see how the triggers fit in just perfect. Okay? All right? Fear of losing her brother, who now has cancer, just like that, and has the wrong relationship. Okay? So she can't stop the worry. So although when I hear somebody is a worrier, it's actually quite specific, but you have to spend a little time and get into all that, and you'll be surprised. So when I made this help her make these connections, even in a short, 30 minutes visit, I told her, look, this is not about your blood pressure. And as a matter of fact, I'm stopping 2 of your medicines, okay? Because I think actually your symptoms are from side effects from it, but also say you have side effects from medicine because you're stressed out. Otherwise, you wouldn't have side effects, nor your blood pressure will be so high. All right? So I wanted to prove it to her. So I stopped the medicine that I thought was causing that. And then I told her, please, try to get with a therapist. Try to work with this. This is how I think may help you to interpret where this blood pressure is coming from. Don't worry about blood pressure. I'll take care of that. Just focus on why you're worried all the time and, get professional help. So since then, she texted me in the mornings like, hey, I'm sorry, I cannot come. But just so you know, I stopped the blood pressure medicine. My blood pressure is good. And I'm seeing somebody. This is much better. I say, okay, all right. So basically, when this happens, trauma narrows our view. I know I'm repeating, is internalized as a child, as shame and worthlessness. Trauma shapes the way we enter the relationships. And we either stay away. So this is important. Trauma shapes the way we enter relationships. How did it shape for her? The first one, the moment she had somebody paid attention to her, within a few months she got married. Eventually she figured it didn't work out. In other words, either I make a misinformed decision from somebody who's finally paying attention to me, and I don't have to work for it, okay? Or it's the other way around. You learn not to ever trust anybody. So then after that, it took 20 years before she married again, or considered. And I told her, have you had otherwise friends or anything? Any relationship? No. Until somehow, after she got better with the heart, better with everything, then she was back in the safe zone. Okay? So then she went, and then that time, so it's either we choose the wrong people, or we stay in situations that are no longer healthy, or we keep generating drama from the trauma that interferes with the relationship by misinterpreting what's happening. And the main problem is trauma disconnects us from ourselves. And Gabor Mate says that what's genetically predetermined is our sensitivity, emotion sensitive to the response to a certain stress, and makes sense, and the rest is just amplifications. Okay, we already saw that. And the problem with this activating this watchtower with prior beliefs from the past, when you see similarities, is that you can't tell the present from the past, the fake from the fact, what's happening now, because there are too many. So the work you're doing, you're trying to separate a sensation, the bodily feeling, from an emotion and from a belief. which is the interpretation of why you have that emotion. They all kind of climb together. I'm worried. That's it. Okay? Can't separate. Big deal. So perception shaped by belief. So when I ask her, okay, your life's important areas, what are you not saying no to? You know, sharing caregiving with my mom, my brother, keeping peace between my friends. I'm very upset that I cannot do that. Cannot say no to my friends when they overstay. Apparently somebody came for a night with a hurricane and then ended up wanting to stay for 2 weeks. And that's not what she had in her mind. And she didn't know how to say no because she wanted the friend to be happy. Although Cleo was irritating her and stressing her out. You think blood pressure will go up. How does my inability to say no impact my life? Feel guilty and shame if I do not care of my brother who needs help, because I know who that woman is, right? Worried all the time. My friends are fighting with each other when we get together. She's a pacifier of the group when they get together. Worried, and that upsets her. Worried and sad that I cannot help my brother who is sick, that is abused. So why do you think she's upset that she can't get all her friends agree with each other when they meet together? What was she asked by her mom when dad came with a girlfriend in the house? Mom asked her, I want you to accept him. You're going to be the pacifier. That's your job from now on. Family is family. It doesn't matter they're wrong. And that's what's happening. She cannot stand if people don't agree with each other. Even if some of them are just bad news. And you'll have to say and point fingers. Okay? So that's that. Or stay out of it. Let them solve their own issues. You don't have to get in the middle of that. That would be easy for us. Okay? But that's why. All right? And then comes the final kick is about her brother, who is in an absolutely similar situation to her dad and the rest of the family. So she's again being abused by a woman who is demanding to listen. Okay? Her to listen. Feeling sad and angry with my other brother who refused to help. The other one doesn't want to get involved. And it's like, wait a minute. Why do I see this as our duty and you don't see that? Okay, what symptoms does she have? Anxiety, worrying, shortness of breath, insomnia, dizziness from blood pressure medicines. Where is the hidden story from behind the belief? It's selfish to say no. Okay? I have to be good to deserve being loved. If I say no, I'm not lovable. So please, that's what's happening with her friends. That's what's happening with all her family members. I'm responsible for how the other people feel and what they experience. I must not disappoint anyone. I'm not worthy unless I'm doing something useful. If people knew what I really felt, they would not like me. If I turned down my friends or colleague, I would feel deservedly guilty. Where did I learn these stories? Because you didn't come up with it today. I can tell you that. My dad cheated and abused my mom when I was 12. I asked her exactly, tell me the worst event in your life. And that's what she told me. My dad cheated and abused my mom when I was 12. And my mom agreed with that and did not support me when I disagree with it. I needed then to protect my mom. And what she said, what hurt the most is not so much that the dad cheated. The fact that mom did not agree with her, that that's not right. Because I feel like you should do that because I want to protect you, mom. Why you are telling me that's not right? The same way for the first patient I present with you, for you, I forgot to mention, ask her, what hurts you the most? The fact that you've been sexually or physically abused by some significant other, or the fact that your mom was not there for you, and more than that, put the fault in you. And she's the one who was accused. And she says, the fact that mom was not there for me, and she told me it's my fault. So that hurts more than the trauma itself. And that's what happened. Okay? So what did she learn when that happened? And mom asked her, put up with it. And it turns out dad, after went through all this, unfortunately, only when he got sick, he was okay. he was still there. He was still trying to help. I learned in order to be loved, I must suppress how I feel, and bottle up, and I need to care for others, and my duty is to keep peace between them. And that's exactly the two main beliefs that are the source of her stress right now. And it's always the same. Okay? All right. So 27 years old, woman who is 27. I saw her a few months ago. New ejection fraction of 10% was actually referred, so we can consider possible transplant evaluation. And it happened about 6 months after delivering the first baby. And that's considered what we call postpartum cardiomyopathy. But I look at her and I immediately say something's not right there. This is not from delivering the baby or being pregnant. 3 months ago, she had several admissions for heart failure presenting with nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath, and she also had seizures. Turns out she's been having seizures since she was 14 from a car accident. Works in design home interior decoration. So what does that tell you? The artist, okay? Highly intelligent and perfectionist. It kicked all that. So I talked to her, and I really couldn't go too deep into this, but pretty much she told me up front that she had history, she had multiple sexual abuse stepfathers. Not just one, several stepfathers in her life that sexually abused her when she grew up. And during the initial visit, she was joined by her husband, who appears very supportive and there for her. So I really diagnosed her with stress cardiomyopathy, okay? Because there was I couldn't quite have the feeling of what exactly. I assumed just taking care of the baby, who was brand new and not sleeping. Maybe that's what's enough for her, considering her prior, how dedicated she would be, consider her prior, childhood abuse. But eventually I found the main reason. So anyway, the problem is that because her heart is so weak, she couldn't tolerate any of those medicines that we have. So eventually I found at least the one that blocks the adrenaline, what we call the beta blocker, and a decent dose that was able to tolerate. But also I advised her that she needs to seek counselor therapy. So she eventually went to Emory, got initially private tutoring, eventually got some group therapy. She told me the group really was useless, but even 2 sessions with somebody in person made a big difference. All right. And then again, 2 months later, she goes back in the hospital with nausea, vomiting, seizures. But incidentally, and escaped to me, I mean, I've been talking to her, and helping her, but didn't say a word. One of our nurses from the clinic picked that up by reviewing her chart. She had 2 admissions, but not for heart failure, for suicidal attempts. And I totally missed that. I guess I didn't go in all the whole thing, but she wouldn't tell me anything about that. So then I asked her, hey, what's going on? Well, the truth is, I don't feel emotionally supported by my husband, and we're not doing well. Okay? And so anyway, I said, look, how's it going with that support and what's happening? So that was the stress. Why she developed cardiomyopathy while she's taking care of her newborn. And that's reactivating on top of what's happening before. So after 2 counseling and therapy sessions and just some anti-adrenaline agent, bang, her EF is improved. I'm talking about within a month, 45, 50%. Okay? So that counseling, she told me, counseling helped me even 2 sessions. I think I have a better idea. She was actually able to say, this is hurting me. There's nothing wrong with you, but you're not helping me for what I need. That's pretty much the conversation I was having with her husband. So they are separated. The baby's between them, but is able to have some free time for herself. And she has it much clearer what she needs to do. I don't know where this is going, and they seem to be a good team together this way for now. But bottom line, this was a stress cardiomyopathy. That's why you improve so fast. You remove the stress. Heart is young, wants to recover. Makes a big difference. Okay? All right. Patient number 7. I have 2 more, and trust me, these are going to be different. So I showed you the version of the forever caregiver from young age, where they bow, the suppressed, they have the flight response and they bow down all the emotions. And it's all about the others. And it's usually associated with a kid who is very sensitive, is also an artist. Okay? And that's how you identify perfectionist and all the other things. So those are some traits. I'm going to show you the other version. I'm going to show you me, the flight version. The fight version, not the flight version. Okay? I'm going to show you a woman patient and a man. And let's see how that goes. You know, that even if you're a fighter, you can still end up in the same trouble. Okay? 55 years old, white woman with history of we actually had history of an autoimmune condition, Crohn's disease. Met her in 2019 for new onset heart failure. As a matter of fact, she went first to another hospital. They have also a heart transplant, and after being with them for about 3-4 months, they told her she needs a heart transplant. And she said, look, what's wrong with my heart? Let's help me out. And then eventually she decided to see me for a second opinion. So, but again, very weak heart, needed a heart transplant. And so then I go and I ask her back, well, what happened before? Before she had some mystery fracture, basically just walking the garden. She started to break her ribs and developed a lot of pain. She also had history of, it's called Hirschsprung, that's you're born with, basically you're constipated all the time. At one point they're so bad they have to do surgery to remove part of her lower bowel. And that was at age 37. Then she developed autoimmune condition, which is Crohn's, of the rest of the bowel, okay, in 2015. And she has all kinds of inflammatory and autoimmune conditions against her joints. And what was fascinating, I said, before she met me, so for about good 9 months, she describes all these horrible fractures and pains and everything. And I said, and she even had surgery, and not even one day she was admitted in the hospital. Not even one day she stopped from working full time. Okay? And I found out, like, what's going on? She says, I was in such a pain. They could not change gears in the car without pain. Had 3 months off. She was happy that finally had 3 months off to go to cardiac rehab for heart failure, which she was grateful that the heart failure physician was, did that for her. Why? Because she was told once she developed heart failure not to do exercise anymore. Guess what? She loves doing exercise, so she was happy at least she can go back to some exercise. But despite that, her ejection fraction was still 10%. She refused the idea of a defibrillator. So then I put her in the hospital. And I said, and what happens, her blood pressure is very low, couldn't tolerate any heart failure medicine, and we know it makes the heart strong. So then I go into the mood where I look into other things that can cause low blood pressure that has nothing to do with heart failure. And then, as I suspected, she actually had adrenal insufficiency. So we need the cortisol produced by our adrenal gland, a low dose, to build a blood pressure. If you don't have that, your adrenal gland is exhausted, then you don't tolerate anything, and you start to actually waste away. All right? So she pushed her stress system so much that it got exhausted, basically. So then, as soon as I put her on meds, I fixed that, then I put her back on. She could tolerate the heart failure medicines. Her heart, within a few months, our ejection fraction improves to 50 to 55%. All right? And then, again, this is the setup, remember. Now, this is not the flight person, the submissive. It's all about the others. This is the fighter. I'm going to show you what this amazing woman was able to do, okay? All right? And yet she developed the same conditions like the others. Autoimmune conditions, 2 of them. She developed congestive heart failure, and she developed adrenal failure. Again, these are all involving the same stress response system disease. All right? So her main trigger was actually the chronic pain from these horrible rib fractures and whatever was happening, and pushing herself to continue to work through and do that, and sleep deprivation. So actually there's a study was done, Gabor Mate mentions this study relationship between, they tested you can measure the amygdala activation by doing brain functional study and cardiovascular events, and they follow people for 5 years after that, and they showed that actually that the higher your amygdala activity in the brain scan, the higher was your inflammation in the cardiovascular system. And the higher your activity in the bone marrow, that you produce more cells. So in other words, whatever happens here, it triggers inflammation here. And this is not independent of that. Pretty much gives a proof for what I was telling you about it. And stress causes amygdala inflammation. If it's chronic, then it pretty much mobilizes the whole system to cause inflammation. So 5-fold higher risk of cardiovascular events if amygdala is constantly activated by chronic perceived stress. All right, so who is this amazing woman? She's very competitive, athletic. Do what you have to do kind of philosophy. She is a personal trainer, all right? Even after she got sick, now she has actually a marine-grade bike in the pool. So she does aquatic biking, all right? As much as I always say, I'm trying to identify patients eating not healthy, I couldn't find anything wrong with anything she eats. And trust me, I can dig into that, all right? So this had nothing to do with not eating healthy. She, because of her prior surgery with the bowel, she's actually absolutely forced to eat super healthy, almost exactly how I recommend and how I eat, okay? So that was not the issue, not eating healthy. Her husband actually is not the problem either. He's got the most supportive husband. He's the one, for one way or another, I don't know how he found me, going through different things. It was just, he said, and apparently told her, oh, this is the person you need to talk, because he's thinking a little outside of the box. And was very supportive. And so then I went back and said, wait a minute, let me see who is this person that, and then she told me that she never met really her mom. She left since birth. Her dad and the grandparents from dad were amazing. Raised her, great childhood, wonderful dad. No problems there. Nerdy, smart in school. Then at age 22, she has to take care of her grandmother while working a master's degree. Gets a job in college, is very good at what she does. As a matter of fact, they want to hire her as a faculty. Work 2 jobs, like helping people and teach, keeps getting degrees. Eventually, she becomes actually in charge of one of those UGA academic institutions in rural Georgia. Was in management, as a matter of fact, director of the academic, and being in charge of 50 faculty staff, trust me, is no short endeavor, okay? At UGA, while she's doing that, she was having another job as a teacher too, full-time, and she was also a trainer and a coach, okay? And then eventually, until she was 46, and then she only had one job after age 46, which is about a year before she met me, as director of clinical teaching for coding at a major hospital chain. She teaches basically online and creates the whole course for a national corporation. And then at age 30, her dad passed suddenly away. And she said, that nearly broke me. Friends of work helped to cope. In other words, this is a person who is loved by people around her, okay? Kept busy working day and night and evening jobs and exercising 2 hours daily through all this. So who is this person? This is a person that's got stoicism that's carried to extreme degree and is reticent about seeking help, puts up silently with agonizing discomfort. Remember all this pain that she had? She never took a day off. It will not voice their complaints loudly enough to be heard or resist the idea of taking painkillers. It's a coping mechanism acquired early in life. It's a part of consequence of reverse of parent-child relationship. So you will tell me, what are you talking about it? She had a wonderful dad, didn't she say that? And grandparents. Yeah, there's a catch. There's no mom. Okay, just because I don't perceive that, she doesn't perceive that. Single parent is always stressful and is perceived by the child. Okay, so basically, a lot of these kids, they have perfectionist, fear of angry impulses, denial of hostility, strong feelings of inadequacy, self-sacrifice, basically which is related to effective loss of one or both parents in early childhood. Okay? So, to quote Gabor Mate, isolated parenting is stress parenting. whether the parent or the child recognize it. Okay? And let's see, we're going to talk about it. So as a coping mechanism, anger is deflected from parent to him, herself, as strong feelings of inadequacy. So any stress perceived from the parent is my fault. And I'm not adequate. So I'm going to conquer this. And she's not the fighter. She's the fighter. That's what she inherited genetically. She decided to be a fighter. All right? So it's the same what happens when you suppress your emotions. Then you get exposed to eventually autoimmune conditions, risk for breast cancer, risk for cancers, and heart failure. So what is this? This is actually called compensatory hyperindependence. It's a rigid belief that she can get through by herself, compensated for emotional needs ignored in childhood, act like she has no needs she cannot take care of by herself. Okay, I know dad is here, I know he's stressed, I know I can do it and help dad. You don't have to worry about it. This is all her childhood is about. There's no problems with that, there's no problems with grandparents. That's what she signs up for herself. Is a coping mechanism acquired earlier in life. And I talked to her, so did you miss not having a mom or anything? So, no, I couldn't care less. I heard she didn't want me, it's fine. So clear, it's not like she missed or she didn't. She had a reaction against of what her mom did to her that she was coping with, which is different, okay? So what are these people? So this is what we call actually a type A personality people. So what's the coping mechanism? How is it manifested? So the way it works is this. I have anxiety and my insecure fears makes me want to do the opposite. So what is the opposite that will help me to get back my security and fortify my self-trust? What am I going to do? Well, if I fear that I'm not good enough, I'm going to be controlling, and I'm going to become a perfectionist. I'm going to get good at anything I do, and I'll be the best. Okay? If I fear that I disappoint the others, I'm going to be a people pleaser. I am concerned. I want everybody to think very highly about me. This way, I'm taking care of myself. I'll always have somebody to love me. I don't care. All right? What about if I fear that I'm lazy? That ain't going to happen. I'm going to just work, succeed, conquer, move on. Overachieving is a reaction to fearing failure. All right? I can do that. Saying no is a sign of weakness. That's not an option. I must be strong. Saying no means I can't handle anything. And her husband actually, she quotes me and said, so how did you get through all this? Oh, the secret is a good husband. That's the secret. She said, actually, she was very supportive throughout all this, and he kept quoting her when she was seeing, before he learned that she has heart failure, she kept telling her, I don't know how you do all this. You're like indestructible, amazing how you can push yourself so much and stay well, quote. And the answer is no. You don't stay well, eventually. All right? So why? Because she had a problem. Her problem was addiction to exercise and addiction to being workaholic. And she found that a way to cope for other things that she may not feel good about it. Okay? And one would call that, but I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. Okay? So, and when I sat with her first time, and I said, look, I think I know what's going on. Then we did a test, we found she has adrenal insufficiency. We put her on medicine. I mean, within days, she was already feeling better, and she was getting back her energy. And I said, can't go back to that. Can't go back to exercise. And I told her, you have heart failure. It will come back if you abuse it again. You're going to have to learn to say no. Okay? So Gabor Mate calls this as disease as the greatest teacher. It's the first time that we face our mortality, we can actually overcome the denial. And she did. And obviously she's an extremely capable woman. I mean, I can tell you after I talked to her, a lot of this I just learned recently when I interviewed her to really know more details. And but she said, look, Suresh, you're first who told me that I'm killing myself doing this. Nobody else did. I thought I was just feeling great doing that. All right. And no, I'm not going back there. So as a matter of fact, now I have the other reaction. Every 3 months she needs like some local procedure or something, and she's worried that it's going to put her back into adrenal insufficiency and heart failure. She's, by the way, off all those medicines, only one heart failure medicine, and actually two, the beta blocker and the interest, and is doing great, pretty much what she does, except she has some hurting from her prior conditions and she might need a surgery. And I said, I don't think you'll ever have heart failure again, okay? I need you to understand, as long as you learn to pay attention and protect yourself and not overdoing, you're going to be fine, all right? It's a different situation, all right? So that's that. And last but not least, I'm going to present you a men version of this. And this is actually even harder. I think it was hard to conquer her. It was not that hard because I found what was wrong with her. So then she learned, she felt safe with me. She trusts me. So then whatever I say is going to go. Well, what are we going to do with this one? The ambitious and the successful entrepreneur. You know, what I call the workaholic. That doesn't define that person, but it's one aspect that I think is important. That's part of the disease, as personality trait. So 72 years old, white man with new onset congestive heart failure. The heart function here is preserved. There's nothing. The heart is not weak. But it's got prior open heart surgery. It's been basically problems with blockages in the heart arteries for a long time. Type 2 diabetes, which is not controlled since age 55. High blood pressure. Also pressure not just on the left side but also on the right side, pulmonary hypertension, asthma, sleep apnea, is obese, but he's got clear issues. You know, is short of breath just to basically walk a few steps outside of the house. She used to smoke, but he quit in his 50s on his own. After actually, not on, the cardiologist told him that he needs to quit, and he actually did listen, which is great. But I always admire people who actually, I always ask, so how come you're convinced to quit? And that was the reason. So first, heart failure admissions is short of breath with few steps at 50 feet. We remove about 50 pounds of fluid. That's how much he had. And then I went on to him, and my usual thing, all right, let's talk about how to eat healthy, how to change what we're doing here. And the moment I said the word green salad, that did not get along with him. So that's rabbit foot diet. Okay, well, we got to find a way how I can eat my meat, and let's see. But the good news, we have a very dedicated wife who is very creative and really work hard with putting a menu together that somehow was conforming with my rules, although it was not perfect, and with his taste. So, unfortunately, although we tried for the past 3-4 months, comes back in the hospital again, this time with worse shortness of breath. And turns out we found him with a new blockage on one of the bypass arteries, and we had to put a stent and fix it. And then I went back and said, man, I know you're trying, but we got to do better with this, because look at your cholesterol, triglycerides are through the roof. We're not really doing well here. Diabetes is still not controlled. So I think you're trying, but we're not doing it right. There's still something missing. Okay, he was quite resistant for a while, and but eventually, you know, was able to do it. And we're going to have that part. But for now, when I talk to him, I want to see who this patient is. So I asked him about childhood. It's like he volunteered to say, well, look, I didn't have any stress. I had a happy childhood. I mean, my dad was successful store owner. I worked in my father's grocery shop from age 8 to 18. I never felt there was anything wrong. It was amazing. As a matter of fact, even while I was working in my father's shop, I had an epiphany at age 12 while sorting bottles. So one day he and he was getting paid some, it's trivial amount for us, but for a child, it was good money, whatever he was doing. And one day he figured out, I'm not going to sort the balls, but I'm still going to cash in the money. Well, it didn't work out, because he comes home and his mom says, I don't know what you did, but your dad is calling. You may want to go back to the store. So when he got to the store, I don't know exact conversation, but basically dad locked him in the store and will not get out until he's done sorting all the balls. All right? And then it turns out that despite all that, when he came out, that was his epiphany. He realized that actually after he was forced to do it the proper way, he actually realized he enjoys it. That actually has a way how he can get rewarded by doing good job. And that became pretty much his belief. And then everything goes well. He's, goes through college, extremely intelligent person, very interested also in academics and learning. Unfortunately, back then, at age 21, he's drafted by lottery. He has to go to Vietnam War. By luck, he comes back 3 years later. A relative, it looks from outside that nothing major happened to him, either body or mind, despite the atrocity he has witnessed. He's actually very grateful, and even today, about that. He applied to optometry school 3 times, and University of California, Berkeley, and he was from California, and he was turned down 3 times. And obviously was very bitter about it because he knew he's actually quite competitive and he deserved it. And pretty sure he was right, because there are people who actually assess very well. I can figure that out, what they can do and what they cannot do. He's proved it. He's highly competent when he puts his mind. But that didn't stop. So it's okay. What's the big deal? I'm just going to go back to the grocery business, and I'm not going to keep worrying about this, So he gets married, still happily married with the same wife, has a child, ends up in grocery business, and very fast track, he becomes a champion, from nothing to running 6 convenience stores, then a whole Southeast chain, become the CEO. And he says, look, I enjoy. This was not work for me. I'm good at what I do, and I enjoy every little bit of it. And I was like, okay, so I was my own boss. I enjoy work, and I did what I like. Never mind, I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I understand it's all about joy, but I did work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even more. And I can tell you, it was not always joy for me. Although I do enjoy taking care of people, and actually, I'm also an academic. I enjoy both my academic side and my patients. As a matter of fact, at one point I was triple. I was doing research in basic science, teacher, and patients. I did that for a good 10, 12 years. So I know what it means to enjoy your work, and I was doing that, and yet I just don't see always being very just joy. Anyway, eventually he cashes in and retires in early 50s. Partial retirement because he still provides consultant work for some major roles in public and private companies. Quit smoking, and then he says, I enjoy life. I might have had here and there an extra scotch. I always ate at the best restaurants, and gained gradually 100 pounds in his 5th decade, and then develops diabetes at age 55. And eventually at 60, he gets open heart surgery, 5 vessel. I thought I was fixed. So you think there will be a message to change something? No, I was fixed. That's what I've been told. So then he's what we call a type A personality trait, trying to put together. This is an outgoing, ambitious, rigidly organized, highly status conscious, proactive and concerned with time management. They are often high achieving workaholics, but they're also very pleasant people, high levels of agreeableness, consciousness, cooperative and self-directed. Companies, any production companies love to hire these people. They bring good money for everybody, including themselves. And they have 3 major symptoms. They could be hostile, which can be triggered by minor incidents, but it's mostly when somebody interferes with their time management. They have to do a lot of time, urgency, and impatience. Described like short fuse or angry. I can tell you for sure that's me. A competitive drive, what causes stress and achievement-driven mentality, and is very likely to have a very high level of denial. Okay, and so these traits are actually reinforced by a culture that demands us to have those skills. Okay, because what is this society about? Competition, financial, social status, individuality, which rewards only the ones who are able to overproduce and overachieve. The others don't. And you have to be the leader. Otherwise, you're not going to be appreciated. It pretty much reinforces what you're looking for. All right? And the problem is when you do that, you start to be attached with, there's never enough reward. It becomes like an addiction thing, and as opposed to, and start to be detached. And by all means, there's never been any symptom in him that has neglected any of the relationship or family or anything else. But he just felt great joy from doing his part and rehearsing, practicing his skills. So over almost 150 years ago, William Osler, who is really the grandfather of medicine, wrote the first textbooks of internal medicine. He observed that it is not the delicate, neurotic person who is prone to heart attack, but the robust, the vigorous in mind and body, the keen and ambitious man, whose engine is always at full speed ahead. Right? That was known a long time ago. Right? Now we have the evidence for it, but he didn't know. He just observed that. And this is part of the same compensatory hyperindemnic. We just believe that he can get it. Now, he didn't have any problem with missing a parent. He had a happy childhood. There's nothing wrong with that. So where did he come up with all this? Why am I saying there's something there? We'll get there. So really, so the issue for him is that once you are developed a behavior that you see it's a key to my success. To me, the way I see it, the lesson with the dad was that you don't need to work to have a dream or be creative. It's okay to be disappointed with that. What it matters is that always develop a skill and be good at what you do, and then people will always need you and you can be very successful. So that was the message, and it was from the dad. So what that means is he tried to actually do what was his dream, what was optometry. He was killed, fine, he didn't dig into much, and actually anybody else would say this is a proper thing. But then be careful what you wish for, because you go back to actually what you're really good at, because he's been honing this for 10 years as a child. I mean, who is going to stop this guy? It's like you trained to be a marathon runner since you're 5 years old, and then you get to compete with somebody who only learned to be a marathon runner like me at age 50. There is no competition there. Of course he's going to be successful, and that's what he chooses to do. But then there is no reason to ever stop. You get a kick out of it. So you get insecure, again, these are all the skills that you achieve. You get to apply and have the same skills just like everybody else. You'll never say no. When I know what it means to be 24 hours on call. So I go over this and I try to figure him out. And then I realize, wait a minute, I'm looking at all that. This is not him, this is me. I mean, I don't see, I'm not perfectionist in cleaning the house. I like it to be tight, but I'm perfectionist in actually what I'm interested to do. And I cannot say no ever if somebody needs my help, particularly on the health side. Definitely I'm a workaholic. I can tell you we didn't have the 80 hours limit back then, and there were days I was putting easily, 100 hours a week for years. Overachiever. Well, I learned that if it's a skill that I have, and I can compete in that skill, and there is no stopping. And I promise you, just like me, this patient is extremely competitive. You can see that. Okay, so the only difference is that, as opposed to me, he kept stating that at any point I just enjoyed it. Okay, which that's the perception that he had to begin with. And I always say, well, all those skills that you put them a good use for a certain purpose. Once you work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for years, that can't be right and be healthy for you. It doesn't matter how amazing you are otherwise. If the drive is to keep succeeding in what you do and scale up. All right? And that was my lesson I learned. And I learned that the hard way. And I'm not talking for him here. I don't even know if any of this could be pure speculation that may or may not characterize. But when I look at this, I'm saying, well, I have all those things, and what was it for me? And I say, really, in early COVID, in 2020, when we started to have COVID, I started to get horrible headaches. I checked my blood pressure for 3 months, was 160 over 110. And I started to snore. My wife started to move next door. And I realized when I look back in some old, because I haven't checked my weight for a while, I was like 30 pounds more compared to 5 years before. So then I started to take medicines. I saw a cardiologist, and I went back and I said, wait a minute, I need to do what I'm telling my patients to do. Gabor Mate was an interesting, on an interview, says, well, every once in a while, my wife said, Gabor, you wrote a book when the body says no. And I think you should write a book when the wife says no. All right, and so that's exactly what was happening to me, and I realized, look, I got to do what I tell my patients to do. So I started to make time for myself, despite all that. That's all I did. I started to make 2 hours for myself, but those 2 hours I'll punish me. Exercise, do the right thing. Within 2 weeks, I was off medicine. I lost 30 pounds. I've been maintaining. I feel great. The point is, the workaholism is a real deal, and whether you enjoy it or not, it doesn't matter what's the source for it. I think actually it's an addiction. It's irrelevant how you justify yourself. It cannot be good. And because you're going to neglect, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to ignore other body needs and mind needs and other things. The difference is that for me, and I suspect for him, is that I need to prove that I'm successful. I grew up in a society where you were not appreciated unless you're part of the party. So it doesn't matter. And as kids, you see each other, whether someone is better than you or not, whether you have the skill or not, you kind of know, but somebody keep telling you, no, 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 no. Okay, well, I would say a similar trigger was him, because the optometry people kept telling him, no, 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 he doesn't qualify. So I'm going to show you what I can do there. And that's exactly, I came here, I was successful, but then you start liking it too much, all right? And now he did have traumas, but the way he always overcame those traumas by having a proper if you want, mental ethics in his mind. It helped him survive the war, being failed to be accepted optometry school. You could switch to some skill that he had, but I still think that the drive to succeed that way, which became a joy, could have been a problem. So, and I think the main reason is because we start confusing in our mind when we say, I enjoy it, the difference between pleasure and actually happiness. So pleasure is something that gives us reward, all right? This is from Dr. Robert Lustig in the book, The Hacking of the American Mind. Happiness is contentment. It's completely different. Pleasure is short-lived. Happiness is long-lived. Pleasure is visceral. It's excitement. You get the kick out of it. The other one is ethereal, calming. Pleasure is achieved by substances or behavior, all right? Whereas here, heroin, nicotine, whether a behavior of being alcoholic, exercise, addiction, caffeine, alcohol, sugar, digital, it doesn't matter, gaming, but happiness cannot be achieved with that. You will never be addicted to something that causes you happiness, like going to church, being with community members, being with friends, doing things together. One requires taking and receiving. That means I am doing this, I'm going to get something back if I get good at it. So I'm getting back social status, I'm getting back money, I'm getting back whatever makes me feel like I got something. And it never stops. The reward has to be variable, all right? And it's personal, it's for me, as opposed to the other one is shared. This one leads to addiction, the other one prevents addiction. One involves a chemical called dopamine, the other one involves a chemical called serotonin. As a matter of fact, serotonin is released the most during the sleep. It's supposed to calm us down. Even it's the main mechanism how we sleep. And also it's released after we do more intense exercise. So I think what happens is misguided. Also, by the way, the food industry loves for us to confuse those things, because look at this. Happiness is a choice. This is not happiness. This is pleasure. And addiction is a choice. And then you got to put the mama and the attachment there in the advertisement. Oh, mama, that's good. Why? Because I kick both of them. I hit the happiness element, which is inquire for everything, and I hit the attachment need. It's very subtle. So food industry propaganda is designed to confuse pleasure with happiness, directed at, and imagine that our kids see this. I never saw this when I grew up. And I'm totally immune to this. As a matter of fact, often just makes me turn off the TV. But that's not what our kids are exposed to, with 100,000 new products on TV and God knows Instagram and whatever they are doing every day. So, And basically the way it goes is that the addiction circuits, so we have the 4 circuits here I'm going through, they're activated the wrong way here. There's nothing wrong at the first sight to work hard and be successful. Why would be anything wrong? Except when it becomes a joy in itself with different rewards. Why? Because there's a difference in working for a living, and that's what I like, versus working because that's what I like. So it's a similar thing that we have it distorts, the addiction distorts, basically we have those 3 mechanisms here that are in the middle. So sorry, let me get this. So we have the 3 centers, the brainstem, we have our autonomic nervous system that tells us what we need. Then we have the emotional, the amygdala that sense the stress. And then we have the, so if the addictions work on just amplifying and serves only one purpose, to calm down this amygdala, but it's independent of anything else. All right? I just need the endorphin, I need the kick, we keep going. And yes, it's easier to see that with drugs or alcohol or food, but it's harder to see that when it's about behavior, like devices, social media, TV, and computer games. Why? Because look what these guys do. They just feed the amygdala, calm it down by releasing the endorphins, which then gives the dopamine, which then goes back in circles. So it disconnects us both from what our vagal nerve tells us to do, that it could be a danger. I mean, you see you're gaining 100 pounds, you see you're getting diabetes, you see you're getting heart attacks and blocked heart arteries, and yet you decide you're going to keep going. Does that worry you? Well, doc said, I just need open heart surgery, it's going to fix it. For me, I don't, I think I'm indestructible. I've always done this. The patients do all this. I gain 30 pounds, high blood pressure, and headache, and I keep ignoring, and sleep apnea. And I tell all my patients about that, and I ask them to do this, and yet I could easily deny that bothers me. All right? And it was going on probably for years. It just got worse in the COVID times. So you see what happens? You get trapped into these 3 circuits, only one is satisfied, and that's the only purpose. And it gets us disconnected both from outside, but also from inside, and we just keep doing what we're doing. And we fail to see the danger, all right? So the dreadful kidney disease is a greatest pleasure, and these circuits are actually the ones where Ozempic work on. So the circuits are favoring the addiction part, and Ozempic now is actually being used. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's coming down. You can try to stop that addiction from the wrong food, all right, with Ozempic or Mounjaro. But until he had that stand, until for some reason it took a while for me to get over and convince him to really try the rabbit foot and just fully embrace it. As soon as we did that, and it took a while, all right, another 6 months, immediately, this is where it was when we started. This is where it is now, the weight. So he started with 320 pounds, okay? A year later, was down to 233, all right? Lost basically 90 pounds. His diabetes was used to be in the 9 range. Now he's actually technically not diabetic anymore. And yes, his cholesterol profile has improved dramatically. His triglycerides always used to be high. He's on cholesterol pieces, his bad LDL is always controlled. But his ratio of triglyceride HDL, which is anything over 5, high risk of heart attack, finally is getting down to 5. And finally, when he accepts, doesn't mean he's just a vegetarian. As a matter of fact, I told him he can eat meat. He was like very happy. That's not what it is, but he insists on eating healthy. His wife cooks. He learned then how to take on, because his wife still worked, to take on his own and just do the right thing. He fully embraced it. And then we even tried to add a little bit of this Ozempic-like medicine, the Mounjaro. And with that, he got a little kick for a couple of months of losing 20 pounds. He's now at 207 or 208 actually most of the time. Unfortunately, couldn't find Mounjaro anymore, so stopped after 2 months, but he's doing it on his own. So we are down about 112 pounds, from which only 20 from, you could say, was coincident with the drug. I don't know, but 2 months of that. No hospitalization for heart failure since 2022. He is able to, he feels best he felt in 50 years, walk 6,000 steps daily. All right, and I asked him, well, what made you finally change your mind? It's like, well, I wanted to feel like a human being and being able to do things. And I saw that finally I can do that if I take that into account. And he overcame his addiction. I didn't realize he's actually such a candid and relaxed person that I did not realize how resistant. I always take it when I see somebody saying that they hate salads, green vegetable, that green salad, that's usually the clue. I actually had patients who literally told me they never in their life eaten a green salad. So that was the clue. There is more outside of the casual manner how he's opposing this to what's happening there. All right? But bottom line, I was saying before that we have an excessive consumption of 5 toxins that causes most of our disease that we have, chronic diseases. But I'm going to add now the 6th toxin, which is stress, that precedes all the others. So stress consumes us, really addicts us to ultra-processed food. That's how we get there, and addicts us to anything, pretty much. We eat our emotions. I saw the comedian Ian Morgan, and I like that. We kind of tend to eat our emotions, and of course, now we have drugs that can help us. Actually, they are making a big difference for those who tolerate and can afford it. I'm not going to say that. There are some things, and we went through this scare of different things, scaring the food industry in the 70s. What they call, this is from The Economist, I like it, was last year an article. In the 70s, we had the calorie scare, and then people, food industry was worried we're going to start buying less. Then was the salt scare, you got to go on the salt food diet, and then was the saturated fat, was the issue. And really, but eventually, and we switched to, no problem, vegetable oil, and the other food industry found ways to change sugar. But really the biggest scare was actually the Atkins diet, where they really, apparently the stock market for food industry went down by 25%. And that ended really when, unfortunately, Dr. Atkins died on a skating accident. And then we had the gluten and dairy scare, which they had to switch to different, and innovatively they came with something else. And I was hoping in the 2020 we're going to have the ultra-processed food scare, and I'll teach you how it is. Just stay away from anything that's packaged and cook at home. No, because we have a solution. We have the Ozempic and the Wegovy and Mounjaro, and you can eat whatever you like and just take this, okay? And it's going to be fine. And I got a problem with that. As a matter of fact, now, companies are catering to just people who are on Ozempic. I'm going to give small portions, highly nutritious, don't worry about it. They're again going to survive just fine, all right? But what I'm trying to say is that really, I think anybody who's got any chronic illness, and obesity could be one of those, you need to first see a counselor. I think anybody who has got, now I have medical students, I have sometimes high school students who come to see me and say, well, I need somebody to guide me, and can I chaperone so because I want to become a doctor, or if they are medical students, the first thing I tell them, first, you need to get a counselor. Okay, because this is the job, is a toxic job. And you need to fix some issues, I don't know if you have them or not, before you go into this. All right? And I think anybody with chronic illness, until you think about it, I promise you it's worth doing it. I don't know probably half of what I just told you about these patients. I think I have an idea of the direction, because that's not what I do. But my job is to be able to at least recognize patterns, and hopefully I can convince whoever needs it to go and seek help. And that's very important, okay? Because I can tell you, hey, what diet are you going to give me that's going to work? We can have somebody cooking for you. You can do anything you want. Not going to be part of that unless we can fix what's causing it, which any addiction starts with actually stress that often started a long time ago in childhood. It requires constant commitment to want to stay healthy, constant coaching. I can tell you, most of the people I succeeded, it wasn't really me. I mean, I go in there and I give some direction, but was the significant other who worked really hard in working that. It's very rare when somebody did it by themselves, okay? Not comfortable. I mean, you're going to have to hate certain foods at the beginning, but eventually it gets better. Meal planning, batch cooking, get rid of all the ultra-processed food from home. and at workplace, because when are we going to be more stressed? At work. And that's when we are the most sensitive. And we spend, 40, 60% of time at work. And I always say, if it doesn't work, just get a therapist and start working on this. And how do we move in order to get from the stress, which is the danger zone, to the safe zone? Well, we do things that involves, being an artist, being creative, get to play, do things together with people who keeps you in the safe zone. I mean, somebody's stressed out. Don't go and have activities with the person who's stressed out. If you're stressed out, you got to pick somebody else who, obvious, somebody you know who cares. Doesn't mean you're not going to try to support the person who's stressed out, but just try to understand it's not going to help you. All right? And go and do activities that makes you, yoga, breathing exercises. Breathing is the way to actually counteract and get into the voluntary part. That part of the wheel that I'm talking about is amazing. Breathing in activates your flight and fight response. You get oxygen in, and if you see all these guys, before I do it, I'm going to take a deep breath. That's what it does. Breathing out as the opposite gets you in charge, slows down everything, activates back the ventral vagal response. So breathing exercises are essential part of the yoga therapy or not, but they really, really work if you keep practicing them, whether it's part by itself or coordinating with something else. Having physical, again, just intimacy, or if you don't have somebody, get a dog. They're amazing. Cats are different. Cats is what you do for them, not what they do for you. Dogs are reciprocal. So they are theoretically a little better, although there are some cats who are exceptions from the rule, the same way there are some dogs who are exceptions from the rule. So, what? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, it's more for them. They will give you what I mean. But, so this is the book that I highly encourage to read. It's really written by Stephen Porges, the one who developed the polyvagal theory in 1994, and there's a lot of science behind it. It's the best way to put together what I show you. We knew about anatomy, we knew about at least the psychological emotional explanation that Gabor Mate said, and we knew about that anything that's wrong with the emotions, if they're in the wrong place, can cause the disease. But he's able to put them together into a construct that we can work with to help. So trauma is not just, and he wrote this, Stephen, his son, who's a journalist, who's very good in explaining this. Our Polyvagal World is an amazing book that's easy to read, anybody can understand, and I highly recommend. But trauma is not just a psychological, it's also physiological and causes real changes in our body. In the modern world, people are almost entirely deprived of opportunities to feel safe in every level, starting with kids in the schools, even if they have that at home, particularly at work. And a lot of jobs, some jobs are more toxic than others. I can tell you working in the hospitals is definitely not an easy job. This manifested anxiety, trauma, stress, unchecked emotions. Whether we feel safe or unsafe, we're going to broadcast to the others how we feel. It's just part of who we are. The same way the others will broadcast back at us and influence, okay? Including the children. We mirror the feelings and states of those around us and vice versa. Feeling safe is necessary for living a good life and bonding with others. Learn, relax, heal, and be creative. And really this all happens through the vagus. But the most important is that if we don't feel safe, all you need to say, oh, I'm anxious. That means you don't feel safe. I'm sad. I'm angry. You don't feel safe. That's what it means. But we can't then access the higher brain functions, and you can't trust your own decisions in that moment. You got to go back to that. The problem is it stops you. It devolves back to default of what happens is prior behaviors that you had. So this is why actually politicians, media, and consumer industry counter that. I mean, have you ever seen an advertisement that doesn't start with, oh, did you know that if you do this, you're about to die? Hey, by the way, I have a solution for you. All right, if you don't, using that product is a disaster, but I have a solution, I have another product. It's always with some threat that has to get you out of that. All right, so let's try to be safe to each other and to ourselves. That's the idea. Now, those are few, and unfortunately, I just brutally took few of those wisdom pearls from their book. But These are my wisdom pearls that I learned trying to put together from all these 3 books that I read. The one is learn to say no when your no will hurt. I think that's very important. Okay. Now you may not be able to say right away no, but I think you can get good at it the more you practice. Learn to say yes to what makes you feel whole. Stay curious. Actually, curiosity is part of our play, how we actually get back into that mood. Develop hobbies, cooking, do things for the others, but also when you cook, exercise, outdoor reach, gardening, whatever you like, yoga, dancing, express yourself as an artist, music, paint. 5 years ago, I started to pick up photography. I don't know, I was bored, but I always liked to learn that, and it turns out I can enjoy it. Play with others. These are all nature's gifts to stay mental and physical healthy. That's how it gets us into the safe zone. Seek counseling for help to move out of the danger zone. Once you recognize you've been for too long stressed or something's happened, something is not right there. It's okay to ask for help. As a matter of fact, it might be sometimes the only way. If obviously you've been doing for a long time and you hadn't done it on your own. And it does make a difference, and remember that often it is the toxic society that you grew up in that form our beliefs in childhood, that deprive us and hijacks our coping mechanism against ourselves in the present. So we bring emotions from the past that no longer work in the present, and we don't know about it because the automatic goal is to recognize yourself and be authentic. Listen to your gut feeling, like Gabor Mate says. And if you can look at the child who's 2 years old, the moment they don't like something, immediately they'll start crying. The child is designed to listen to their gut feeling, and we should learn to do that too. And promise that you don't, because we got disconnected, then we focus on something else that we think is important. One thing I learned, at least was a lesson for me, is that I start to see life different just spending time with children, because they're so different from us. And then the trick is to learn to accept them for who they are and don't try them to mold them. Obviously, we need to guide and can't let them do something that can hurt themselves or the others. But short of that, we don't have to intervene with anything. We can just observe them and try not to make them to fit in the society. They shouldn't do something that's harmful, but that's a different story. We just need to guide them. But also, I learn a lot each time I see them interacting and remind me who I was and but they teach us a lot how nature intended us to be. And really, a big problem that I have, especially when I see, children exposed to device use. I use devices, okay? Don't get me wrong. As a matter of fact, I don't know how most of my education now is related through devices. But I watch YouTube, certain videos, I listen in my car, but I control them. I'm not controlled by them. I don't pick up the phone unless it's a specific purpose for a certain reason. This iPhone is the doom of my existence. I cannot stand it because I know it's always some to-do task list that I have if I get a text or call. So there's nothing wrong with the device if you can put it at use and not be used by it. And if you can't and you're addicted, then it's a horrible, it's a very dangerous way. It's because all this, what we call social media, is actually anti-social media. I'll show you the mechanism. It's not social. And it leads to, it's part of actual disease that leads to personal and social disconnected as part of the culture. We went away from reading books and keeping a journal. And why? See, when you read a book, it's only so fast you can go through news. You actually are forced to think about it and process. Use this guy. That's the problem. We stop thinking and using what allows us to have a will about it. And if you just watch a movie or you watch some things that's just a quick curiosity that triggers our addiction, then it never gets to be processed. Why? Because it only triggers old beliefs. They're fast track and you keep moving from one to another. You actually stop practicing to think, And now another thing that helps to get out of danger zone, be sure you sleep well. But I can tell you, no screen time for at least an hour before you go to sleep. As a matter of fact, there's evidence showing you that, mindless scrolling through Instagram or social media increases anxiety and actually stops you from being able to go to sleep. Not because first of all, what you see is designed to make sure it stresses you out and puts you in the danger zone. Okay, that's how you get hooked. But let's assume that you don't get stressed by that, by a miracle. The simple fact that your brain, it just activates your dopamine circuits, it actually causes you anxiety. This alone can hook us into a vicious circle of insomnia and nightmares, which will lead to more anxiety and depression. So I always say, when it comes to social media and kids, and I know they created this social, the kids-friendly social media, I only have one word, all right, delete, okay? And do the same with your buying shopping app store. And if you don't believe me, just do this experiment, just for a month, completely delete it, and give yourself a break. You'll be surprised how suddenly you become financial positive, but also mind positive. Then you'll have to do something else with your time, and you'll be surprised then you don't have to go back. So, or you are able to be really in charge of it and really make it work for you. But few of us actually are able to do that. I can tell I do. I mean, I go home, I may not use my phone on the laptop, but I do turn on the Netflix. Okay, plenty. So, basically, so the way this works, I told you about these three centers that we have, and now we have a stimulus. I'm scrolling through all this news and info stuff they are really interested about, and they know I'm interested about. Okay, I don't know whether it's Trump, you're a Trump supporter, is Trump-related stuff. If you look what he says is amazing, or Harry supporter looks what he says is amazing. So they keep feeding you whatever you're looking for, more and more. Well, when that happens, it's all dopamine release. It blocks immediately even if you think you're thinking, you're not doing any thinking. You're just activating more dopamine release. But believe it, in the background, all that activates the cortisol and adrenaline too, which nobody tells you about it, which then blocks you and is trying to calm down. Why? Because the job of the cortisol, it's actually adrenaline, is also to calm down the amygdala. Okay, particularly you've been placed in danger zone by the devices and whatever you're scrolling through. Okay, and then but it blocks your serotonin once you activate the dopamine. Why? Well, and what's the problem with serotonin, blocking serotonin at night? Well, that's how we sleep. All right. So by itself, it's just activating. So basically, you get just this guy, the middle circuit, activated on its own. There's just a reward dopamine addiction circuit that completely disconnects you from what's happening here, but also what's happening in your reception. Your vagal nerve is not able to sense danger even if it's there, or the other way around, will sense danger and misfire when there is not there. You just do that. Say, oh, it's an addiction. Well, it's not just an addiction. Addiction per se, and what you get fed through inability to be able to process properly through a thought process the information because you just scroll, it blocks you, moves you into the danger zone. Okay, particularly you're sensitive. Yeah, I mean, you got a job, you got 10 other things. So we disconnect both ways. All right, that's it. And so when you look at that, all right, okay, and I just use this just because it's the election time. It doesn't matter which one, but these are stressed people.
Yeah.
I mean, let's assume I'm stressed. Am I going to feel better? No.
One has a stressful job.
Well, but look, it doesn't matter. They're both. I don't think this is. I don't want to be in their shoes in any of them. Okay, that's not the point. Whoever you go for, it doesn't matter. But that's not going to.
I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying one has a job and one doesn't.
Okay. All right. So anyway, here's a job that we should all look for. Try to connect by looking at people who actually have some facial expressions. Okay. All right. That's important. Or the dog. And these are the 3 books that I highly recommend. I cannot believe. Oh, okay. I need to stop this, but I'm done actually. And of course, my.
You're right on time.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yes,
okay.
you are.
So
it's always 4:30.
Yeah, right. So chronic.
10 minutes on.
So the chronic emotional stress basically is an essential driver of the lifestyle behavior. Trauma leads to psychic wounds which are unhealed, prevents us from living in present, and disconnects us from ourselves. And really, the emotional circuit is developed as a child to protect us, create lifelong behaviors and beliefs that are against us as an adult and predisposes actually to disease. And we need to be able to recognize. I think counseling therapy, doesn't matter what version you're going to do, as long as it works for you, is essential to recognize us with ourselves and manage physical diseases. And really healing a broken heart starts with actually stress management or any conditions chronic. And then that will put us in the position that we actually can implement lifestyle choices that otherwise rationally we agree, but we have failed to be able to do it before. Okay? And like always, this is my problem, but a lot of the others are on the internet, on the YouTube channel. Okay, thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions if you still have any energy.
Don't stress yourself out.
Oh no.
See, you increased the time to 3 hours this time.
Yeah.
You're
a good observer.
Just start at 4.5.
Got it.
And now if you go to 5 and 6, then you should worry.
Yeah, but everybody gets tired eventually. It's only for so long you can keep talking, even me.
Depends.